Hi, here I am, the time traveler. Well, I did have another reminder of the travel through time the other day. I went to the memorial service for a woman who was basically a peer of mine. She was the mother of one of my daughter's best friends. So when you have when you see that, you realize that time is precious, and I don't gratitude, I think, is the first thing that came to my mind. But then the second was preparation. Then I realized, or I shouldn't say realized, it was reaffirmed that it's necessary to put your affairs in order in such a way as your children or those or your family members or whoever who's going to be responsible for moving on to the next square has what they need to make it done as how can I put it, as appropriately as possible, conserving assets and hoping, and actually, in a way, if you plan ahead, you also are kind of bringing your own wishes to the situation. You are planning how the process will take place. Now, I have my notes, okay? Again, I'm not an attorney. I'm not giving any legal advice. My suggestion is that you do contact a specialist in elder law, look at your situation, and try to make the plan that best meets your needs. Because what has happened now, because of because of longevity, people are living much longer than expected, and the issue is, how are they going to protect their assets? Because for the most of the middle class, any assets that we have is a result of a lot of people working really hard to get to this point. Now, of course, the baby boomers are the beneficiary of the post-World War II economic boom. Their parents came back from the war. We had the only industrial infrastructure left, and we were the factory of the world. Okay, so the baby boomers then inherited from their own parents, I would say, a nice grub stake, okay? And then the baby boomers had a chance to add on to that. And now we have come to the point where we're looking at 10,000 people a day turning 65 in the United States this year, last year, and next year. Okay, so we have a lot of people going on. This is the largest intergenerational transfer of wealth that probably has ever happened. It's just huge. And how to do that in a way that preserves the assets appropriately and helps to preserve the economic base of the middle class. So first I'll give you the documents, then I'll talk a little bit more. Okay, now here are the decision-making documents. These are, again, I'm not an attorney, but this is what I picked up off a webinar that I attended. First is a durable power of attorney. This is where you're saying, I'm going to have thus and such take care of my financial affairs where I'm designated this person, where I'm not able to do so for some reason, okay? Then there's a healthcare proxy. Again, that's a sort of a thing, like, in other words, who would I trust to make decisions regarding my healthcare? And then you authorize them in this. Again, talk to an attorney. But these are from my understanding, these are the kinds of basic things that should be in place to make everything work better. For you, first of all, and secondly, for your family. And then the living will, which is, as far as I understand it, a decision as to your, what kind of care, what kind of end-of-life care would you prefer? keep me going at any cost, whatever. This is something that's very personal and you have to decide for yourself. And then, of course, there's the HIPAA authorization. HIPAA is a confidentiality law that requires that a person be authorized in order to be able to access health care records. So that should be in the package also. Again, I'm not an attorney. I just saw a webinar, but I want to alert people to the let's say it would be a very sensible thing to do, because you work for the most part, you work really hard for whatever you did, and your parents did, and maybe your grandparents and those before them all did, in order for you to have what you have. And it can easily be lost by the incredible cost of long-term care, nursing home care, and other health care. Okay, so then the other part, this is in terms of, again, this is what I learned from the webinar. The assets, what do we need to leave the assets to the family? Okay, so that is a will. Number one is a will. And then they did discuss a number of different alternatives for trusts. One important one, especially if assets are, no matter what, one important thing is the Medicaid irrevocable trust, which allows you to protect assets from Medicaid recoupment. Knowing the high cost of long-term and other care, it becomes critically important to shelter assets if at all possible. Now, wealthy people have known this for a long time. That's why you have Rockefellers and other people who have preserved their capital and appreciated it through the generations. They long ago learned that this needs to be done for various reasons. So there's a variety of trusts that are available based on your needs. The one important thing about the irrevocable trust is that there is a 5-year look-back period as far as Medicaid eligibility is concerned. So that is something to keep in mind in terms of timing. But again, I'm not an attorney. This is why they have elder care attorneys. My advice is to think about that option to preserve your assets and to help your children or other family members get a little booster shot and remember you by. Get a little financial kick up, But it's a very serious matter, because we're talking about the dissipation of the engine that drives the prosperity of the middle class, which is the intergenerational transfer of appreciated assets. So just as an example, friends of mine just sold a house they bought around here in, I think it was 1980, 81, for $180,000. They just sold it for just $983. I don't remember. I think they conceded $7,000 in repairs or something like that, but just around $1 million. So think of that going to your family members as opposed to going to Happy Acres, assisted living, nursing home, long-term care. That's why it's very serious to think about this. But you can't tell anybody what to do. You can just talk about alternatives. But hopefully, it gives you something to think about. So here's the time traveler marching along and grateful for every day